Hey everyone, Mitch coming from the Commander's Core studio with
Alek. Hey,
I forgot to do this on the last episode. Actually, depends on what order I put these out, but regardless, like that's how I like to start it.
Yeah.
And I messed it up, but I was like, we're just gonna keep running. We're just gonna keep running.
As we do.
Yep.
Yep.
And you're professional, so you just keep running with it too.
Am I professional?
You're very professional.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, cool.
You've been on at least like 10 episodes. That's professional at this point, right?
Sure.
There you go. Yeah, you put up more than 10. Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere more than 10, it's professional. I think that's the rule. Okay. You got it. All right. So you are professional. And what professional topic are we talking about in this episode?
You know, this is something that I always like to do with my decks is putting in some sneaky combos or things that like kind of come out of left field a little bit. A lot of people will be familiar with the Dark Depths and Thespian Stages combo. Yep. And, you know, again, there's a lot of decks that are built specifically to take advantage of this particular interaction, but it's a 2-card combo, and a lot of times you can just kind of sneak it into a lot of decks that don't really care about a ton of, you know, mana pips or anything.
100%.
Like that. So,
and I guess let's start with this too. Like when you talk about like these kinds of like under the radar combos, it's not necessarily just like okay, like dramatic reversal ice crown after I like win the game.
Right.
Like you don't just win the game by Dark Depths Thespian Staging, but like it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And if your deck already has one of the 2 pieces in it already, it's like if you can make it work because it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. And just like again, these are a lot of things that we haven't seen out of a lot of different decks. Like Thespian Stage and Dark Depths a little bit more common, but some of the things that we're bringing up are things that you don't really see all the time, but can be like a fun addition to your decks that don't always find their way onto EDH rec, and they're not like what I call staple traps. You know, these are just kind of like fun additions to almost any deck that can run the colors.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start off with I guess we should say like Thespian Stage. What you're doing is you're making a copy of Dark Depths, and it makes Merit Lage essentially just because you don't have any counters on it.
Right.
Okay.
And
so
because they're lands, there's not a huge opportunity cost to run this in your deck.
Exactly. You put them both in your deck, and it's like, if I get both of them, cool. Or like if you have like crop rotation type effects that can actually tutor up specific lands. We were talking about some earlier, just like before we started recording. Yeah. There's more and more of those lately where it's like, okay, I can go get specific lands, get them into my hand, get them in play, whatever I need to do, the Urza's Cave thing or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, by the way, here comes Merit Lage. Good luck.
2020.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so for some other kinds of combos, how do you want to start with the Radiate one? You've got 8 cards to talk about. What card do you want to start with?
Well, this really kind of revolves around Radiate and Radiant Performer. Okay. So these are 2 cards that both cost 3 and double red. One is an instant, one is a creature, 2/2. The creature has flash. The Radiate says, choose target instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single permanent or player. For each other permanent or player that spell could target, put a copy of the spell onto the stack. Each copy targets a different one of those permanents and players. Radiant Performer does essentially the same thing. It does impact abilities as well, but, you know, essentially the same thing.
Yep.
So the thing that I like about these is like these fit very well in basically any deck that cares about instants and sorceries. You know, blue-red is so common to have lots of copy storm kind of effects, so these kind of fit very nicely into those kind of decks anyway. But honestly, you can put a lot of these in there because they're nice kind of insurance cards against you know, targeted removal. You can kind of like play around like mutually assured destruction with these kind of cards. Like someone's like targeting your creature with the Doom Blade, and you can cast Radiate, and all of a sudden all the non-black creatures on the battlefield are gone. So can be kind of a interesting way of approaching, you know, addressing specific removal. But you know, depending on what colors you're running or what your approach to your deck, you can also kind of interact with different other effects this way that are unique.
You can do things that you shouldn't be able to do.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like turn individual removal spells or individual like benefit effects into massive ones.
Yeah.
So like a good example is like Gust of Wind.
Okay.
This is kind of like a build your own Cyclonic Rift and drawing a bunch of cards kind of effect. So Gust of Wind, for those not familiar, is a 3 blue sorcery. And it does say that it costs 2 less to cast if you control a creature with flying, not super important. But the main thing is return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand and draw a card.
Yep.
So in Commander on its own, this is a pretty abysmal removal spell.
Hey.
But,
a lot of flying decks out there like, hey.
But it does replace itself, so, there is that element. But,
Yep.
If you had any interest in playing the Radiate combo, all of a sudden you cast the spell and you radiate it, and all of a sudden it returns all non-land permanents you don't control, and then you draw a card for each time that the spell resolves.
So literally superior to Cyclonic Rift.
Except
that it's sorcerer speed, but still.
Yeah.
Superior to Cyclonic Rift.
I mean, this is going to be like, Cyclonic Rift to your opponent's side and then draw like 20 cards.
Yeah. You win. You already won by Cyclonic Rift to your opponent's mode. You super win.
Yes. You super win.
Yeah.
So like kind of unique effects there. Specifically to Radiant Performer, Buried in the Garden is kind of a fun card that a lot of enchantment decks will play strictly for the ramp and removal. But so this is a newer card from Mirza Karlov Mana. It's 2 green and white enchantment aura. Enchant land, and when this enters, exile target non-land permanent you don't control, again, until Buried in the Garden leaves the battlefield. And then similar to other Oblivion Ring style effects, when this when it leaves,
Those things come back.
Things come back.
Yep.
But then it has the additional effect of when the land that this is enchanting taps, it taps for an additional mana.
2 additional mana, I believe. Or is it just one?
Just one.
It's
just one for this one.
Yeah.
But what you can do with this is with the exile effect on the stack, you can flash in Radiant Performer. And even better, if this land is untapped when you enchant it, you can, make the cost of Radiant Performer a little bit less.
Quite nice.
And then it's going to exile all the non-land permanents your opponents control under this one spell.
This
one enchantment.
Everything is buried in the garden.
Yeah. You're talking about like war crime level of buried in the garden kind of.
These are like 2 cards I feel like they could just be like happenstance in the same deck and someone wouldn't even realize it, being like, okay, like I like this kind of ramp with removal.
Right.
And then Radiant Performer is like it's kitschy and it can like do some like interesting copy things even on your opponent's things too. So like, okay, like I might just include both, and then you're like, oh wait.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
But my favorite interaction of this is if you're like really caring about copying any of your own stuff or anything that's on the battlefield, really. Yep. One example is like Mythos of Iluna, or even like Rite of Replication, you could say.
Yep.
But Mythos is a 2 blue sorcery. It says create a token that's a copy of target permanent. If green red was spent to cast the spell, instead create a token that's a copy of that permanent, except the token has, when this permanent enters the battlefield, if it's a creature, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. That fighting aspect doesn't matter so much with this specific interaction, but because, again, you're targeting 1 permanent, if you radiate this, then you create a token copy of every permanent that's on the battlefield.
Including all your opponent's lands, too. You're literally saying, what's your board? I get your board. I also get twice my board, too.
Right. And I'm sorry, but if you don't win off of this particular interaction,
you've
done
wrong.
Something wrong.
You're doing terribly wrong. Next, exactly. Your opponents are just like, oh, this person has 4 times as much resources as I have now. You should probably be able to win.
Yeah. So, again, there is a little bit more opportunity cost to run Radiate and Radiant Performer in your deck. You do kind of need to build into it a little bit. Yep. And of course, you can add more cards that you want to, such as Mythos of Iluna if you're in those colors, to make that particular interaction happen. But I personally just find it really fun whenever these situations 100%.
Come up. Yeah, you have an entire deck built around Radiant Performer.
Yes, and that is true. I do have that deck built.
I was just wondering, how am I going to lose this time? Like, what tiny, minuscule, weird card that never sees play anywhere is like, oh, it targets a single thing. Oh, now it targets everything.
Yeah.
My entire deck is gone now because you changed the name of all my cards or whatever it was. I can't remember that one.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And like, it's fun to see like, when during spoiler season too, like when new cards come out of like what kind of things can interact with this combo.
Yep.
One of the newest cards from Bloomburrow, Season of the Burrow, is really, really fun with this card because Season of the Burrow is 3 and double white as a sorcery. And it says choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. 1 paw print is create a 1/1 rabbit. 2 paw prints is exile target non-land permanent. Its controller then draws a card. And then 3 paw prints are return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. When it comes to Radiate, again, you need to make sure that you only target have one target selected, otherwise the spell doesn't work.
Yep.
But that doesn't really matter, because if you're going to be doing all of them anyway, you'd only need to select one. So for this interaction, when you cast Season, you select exile target non-land permanent, and then three of the create 1/1 bunnies. So that means then you exile all the non-land permanents on the battlefield. Their controller then draws a card for each one of them, but then you get three bunnies for each time the spell has been copied.
It's insane. So like, everything's gone. By the way, I've got 600 rabbits.
I mean, what they say about rabbits, propagating very quickly. This is how it happens.
There you go. Radiate apparently in Season of the Burrow. That's just how it works. That's awesome.
Consider Radiate. I've had a lot of fun with it.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a really cool card. Okay, next up, and you've done this in like multiple decks, I feel like, but like Ghost Quarter shenanigans? Like, I love it.
For those who haven't seen the card, Ghost Quarter is still colorless land. It adds 1 to your mana pool, but it also has the additional effect of you tap it and sacrifice it.
You also can radiate this, is that right?
Yeah, you technically can.
Look, radiate even more.
Radiant Performer.
Radiant Performer. Radiant Performer. You can radiate Performer it. So
which it is in that deck, but
there's that avenue to it as well. Okay, continue.
Mass land destruction, but we don't advocate.
We don't advocate for it. It just happened to be in there. Don't worry about it.
Like it's
I'm fine with creative mass land destruction. Okay, like Kamal, like I turn all your lands into creatures or whatever. That's your own fault for casting the Wrath of God at that point.
Right. Of course.
Okay, continue. Sorry, Ghost Quarter. This Ghost Quarter is different. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you sacrifice the Ghost Quarter, you can destroy target land. Its controller may search its library, his or her library, for a basic land card, put it into the play, shuffle his or her library. I remember this interaction first coming up when watching Stanislav Sivka win the Seattle Pro Tour, Return to Ravnica. It was really cool because he could reset his lands that he's tapped. And by sacrificing the Ghost Quarter, hitting his own land to search up a land on his own, and it comes to play untapped, so that's important for this.
Yeah.
And then when he casts Second Sunrise or Face Reward, both the Ghost Quarter and his land that he sacrificed came back. So really relevant for that. Still sees play in my own Eggs deck. Yep. But ever since... what set is are these originally
that was that Modern Horizons 2?
Modern Horizons 2.
I'm pretty sure.
The bridges, the artifact lands from that set.
Yeah.
They're the dual lands that come into play tap, so not super great, but they are indestructible.
They're amazing. They're in my Garth deck. The Garth deck is based off of these. Yeah.
And so it's unique with Ghost Quarter is that if you target something that can't be destroyed, it still searches up the
still goes
land.
Off.
So again, Ghost Quarter isn't the best fetch land that you can run, but if you're looking for budget options, Ghost Quarter and these indestructible lands just means that when you sacrifice and target your own land, you get a basic untapped.
100%.
And you also have the flexibility of being able to deal with opponents' lands that are problematic. Valakut,
Gaia's Cradle,
Field of the Dead, Gaia's Cradle, all sorts of different
islands.
things. Yeah. Yes.
They shoot up another island. You're like, oh no!
Oh, I can't deal with the island.
Stop it!
I better destroy that island so they can get another one.
There's no stopping them. The blue players got counterspells.
It could do something against what's that new blue Kraken, the Deluge or whatever.
True, yeah, there you go.
Get the flood counter out of here.
There you go, yeah. Get it out of here. Slightly smaller. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so, again, not a super amazing fetch land, but it's something that, again, doesn't take a lot of opportunity cost for you to play. Yeah. If you're in multiple colors, you're probably looking for duels to put in, and this is not, again, the best duel, but it's something that has some interplay, and, you have functionality against opponents' lands that, you don't have to get a Beseju to deal with.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Okay, next up you got Kodama Bounce. So let's pull up Kodama first to talk about Kodama. The East-3 6/6 legendary creature Spirit with reach for 6 mana in green. Another permanent enters the battlefield. If it wasn't put on the battlefield with this ability, we put a permanent card with equal or lesser mana value from your hand on the battlefield, and it's got partner as well.
Yeah, and so this card has some really interesting play with, again, lands, but specifically bounce lands. Yep. So depending on what colors you're looking at, but like Simic Oath Chamber, the ones that when they enter the battlefield, they bounce.
Yep.
Guildless Commons is another one. And you can, Kodama the East Tree is a great card to put in any green deck, mostly because, you get additional value out of basically any permanent that you play. And then it's also basically kind of like an additional land. So like when you play a land with Kodama the East Tree, it triggers, and that means you can put another land in your hand onto the battlefield. So it's kind of like a continual
say like
ramp
you
effect.
can plenish a land this turn.
Yeah. So like it's a really bad explore on a creature, but because you can do other things with it, I usually consider it worth it. And the main interaction here is like whenever you have any other something in play that puts a permanent onto the battlefield from a landfall trigger is when you can really take the most advantage out of this. So thinking like Scoot Swarm, which when a landfall, when something enters, it makes a 1/1 or a copy of Scoot Swarm. Toggo Goblin Weaponsmith puts in a rocks into play when a landfall happens, or even just like Avenger of Zendikar. Everyone knows that, again, same thing. Well, actually, no, Avenger doesn't quite work with this, but think of like Tireless Tracker. When land enters, you make a clue, right? Yep. So the interaction here is a little bit tricky where when you want to stack the triggers in the way that you got the land trigger that bounces another land. You've got the Scoot Swarm trigger. I'll just use that as the example that makes the other
the 1/1
insect.
Yep.
And then the Kodama trigger, which then allows you to play something else that has 0 or less mana cost.
Yep.
So in this case, you'd probably stack it where the land bounces, and you'd actually choose in this case to bounce itself.
Yep.
So play the Simic Growth Chamber, bounce the Simic Growth Chamber. And then you resolve the Kodama trigger.
Token. Oh, yeah.
Which would allow you then to put the Simic Growth Chamber that you return to your hand back into play.
Yep.
And that triggers, again, the landfall effects.
Yep.
And then Scoot Swarm will trigger putting a 1/1.
Yep. Or another Scoot Swarm.
Yeah, Scoot Swarm. And sorry, I messed that up a little bit, but
you're fine.
You would then interject after the Simic Growth Chambers come into play to bounce itself again to your hand. Now, you can't continue to loop that to Kodama's own effect because it does specify that, like, if the
wasn't put with the ability,
you can't do it again.
Yeah.
But that resets itself whenever you do get the Scoot Swarm token. So this basically results in the continual loop of land enters, it bounces itself, it makes a Scoot Swarm token. Then you can trigger Kodama to put the land back in, and that just continually recycles.
It's so weird, so awesome. Yeah.
Infinite, Scoot Swarms, infinite rocks.
And it's not hard. Again, if you like, having Kodama in a deck, like, okay, like I'm going to already get a lot of value from that. I'm in green. Landfall is good generally. Scoot Swarm, that it's not, you don't have to argue with putting that in or not. And then you're like, oh yeah, bounce lands. That's super simple to put in a deck that most decks have. Not most, many decks have in already.
Right.
So it's like, oh, okay, here we go. Here's just built in, absurd combo.
Yeah. And again, you don't really need for this to build around this specifically. It's just like you said, these are good cards to have in decks that are of these colors.
Yep.
You might as well run it anyway, and when it happens, all of a sudden, like, it's an oopsie, but it's like a kind of a win the game oopsie.
Yep. And sometimes you need those, like, okay, the game should end now at this point, most likely, unless someone just wraps the board. Then all of a sudden, you're not there.
Yeah, well.
So I get the Warstorm Surge in there. There you go.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Okay. So next up, you got Feralid Sage. Looks like so. Feralid first.
Yeah. So Feralid has been around forever in Commander. It's a 2-green creature elemental, 0/0, but it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And it has the ability of 1 in a green, remove a +1/+1 counter from it to have target players search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped.
I always forget that it's target because no one ever is like, you.
Very unlikely.
Yeah, that you're actually
I don't think I've ever
else.
seen that
I've
before,
never ramped anyone else with
you
a
never
know. Just myself. Very
Yeah.
selfish.
And then the pair with that is Evolution Sage, which is 2 and a green. Creature Elf Druid, 3/2, and this has landfall. Again, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you proliferate.
Yep.
So the obvious interaction with this is that with both on the battlefield, you remove a counter from Feralid and have a land enter, and that triggers your Evolution Sage, which then puts the counter right back on Feralid, assuming that you still have a +1/+1 counter.
So you have repeat rampant growth again and again and again and again and again.
Yep. And again, if that's all you're doing with it, that's really good.
That's still amazing.
Way of you don't even need to tap Feralid. Just as much 1 in a green you have available for yourself, you just churn over and over and over again. So just 2 cards just to have a repeatable rampant growth effect in your deck. Great. And again, for decks that care about +1/+1 counters or really counters of any sort, this is going to be a good inclusion in your deck to, just have more ways of also proliferating.
Yep.
Planeswalkers, even poison counters if you want to go that direction.
yeah, exactly.
We're not advocating for something crazy.
Take your opponents out with infect, but take your opponents out with infect.
Yeah.
And then again, this is one that you might already have in one of your decks and realize that you have like this combination. Again, actually, I probably should mention this earlier. Go to commanderspellbook.com at some point and just like paste in your list. They've got like a little tab somewhere where you can just paste in your list of your deck, and it shows you what combos are in there. And it goes like some are like 3, 4, 5 card combos or whatever, but like you might not know you have things in there already, and you already do.
Yeah. So and it's kind of fun to explore and see where these go.
Yep.
And with this particular effect, if there's other cards that you want to you might consider playing already for the deck, just make this particular combination way better.
Yep.
For example, like Crystalline Crawler.
Yep.
Whoops,
I went to the wrong one. Cryptic Trilobite is what I went to. Here we go. Crystalline Crawler. Go ahead.
That's a 4-mana artifact creature construct. That's a 1/1. And has converged, so it enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. And then has the effect of removing a +1/+1 counter from this just to add any 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And it can also tap itself to put a +1/+1 counter. Obviously, this works great in combination with the other two on the field, because then you can add the Proliferate adds more +1/+1 counters onto the Crystalline Crawler.
Yep.
And you can use to pay the mana cost of the Feralid activation.
Yep.
So in that case, like if you just had those three, you only need to pay 1 colorless mana for each time you want to search up a land. Similar effects with Pentad Prism or Cryptic Trilobite, even Lost Jite. If you
that's so funny.
If you wanted to play with that, untaps a land when you remove the charge counter from it.
So if you've got like a bounce land like Seven Growth Chain, where you just there you go, all
your
lands out of your deck. Congratulations, all your basics. Yeah.
So, again, not super ground breaking, not something that you're necessarily going to build your deck around, but just kind of fun interactions that if you already had one or both of these cards in your deck, you need to look out for the interaction.
Yeah, and they might synergize with the rest of your deck anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, next up, Smothering Folio. What a name. Okay, Folio of Fancies. It's a really funny card. Absolutely love this. What deck is this in of yours?
This is in Radiate, of course.
Okay, yeah. All the things that you just like took your Radiate deck, you're like, what combos are in here?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
But so Folio of Fancies is an artifact, 1 in a blue. And it says players have no maximum hand size. Fine. You can pay XX and tap it for each player to draw X cards. And then also 2 and a blue to tap, and each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their library into their graveyard. So a mill effect.
Yep.
And then, I would expect a lot of us are familiar with Smothering Tithe at this point.
Unfortunately,
it's a 3 and a white enchantment that says whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, you create a treasure token. And so the interaction with these two is that with both of them on the battlefield, you pay any number of X to have each player draw X cards.
Yep.
And not only do you draw cards, but then you force your opponents to draw cards, which then you tax with the Smothering Tithe.
And they most likely will not be able to pay 2 for every single one of theirs, or even 2 for any of them, and then you get a ton of treasures.
You get a ton of treasures. And usually you're mana positive, because if, say, it's a 4-player pod, even if you put 1 into X, that's 3 opponents drawing a card that then you would hopefully get treasures back for.
Yep.
So this can go really crazy, especially if you get to activate this multiple
times,
turns in before they realize the problem.
Yes, 100%.
And these Smothering Tithe is played, as a lot of us know, in a ton of different decks. And Folio of Fancies works really well with a lot of other effects that you might be playing in more of a group huggy deck. Howling Mine, your Quain. These effects, work really well with Folio and Smothering Tithe already.
Yep.
So this is, if you're running Smothering Tithe and you've got access to blue, this might be something that you'd really want to consider.
It's a really fun card.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. Okay. One that I wanted to bring up that I built in a recent deck was basically, these are like I love when you just have like, here's a card, Banishing Knack. And then here's another card that's the exact same retraction. Like Wizard just like,
Yep.
change the name, change the art, same thing for some reason. But but then they're like, oh wait, we're never gonna do this again. Like this is not gonna get reprinted in any other kind of way. Anyways, instant for a single blue mana until end of turn. Target creature gains tap, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This is like an interesting card where it's like it's not good enough removal for most decks out there because like you do have to like it is nice like when it comes to like the amount of mana that you have to pay to bounce an opponent's non-land permanent instant speed is typically 2. It's usually these days like 2 and you get like a small other benefit maybe like potentially like if you target your own thing or a discount if you target your own thing. This is like just 1 mana to bounce something that's nice, but you do have to dedicate it to a creature to tap that creature. And like an opponent might remove your creature before you actually get the effect anyway. So it is risky. That being said, it also has a lot of upside to it if your deck already has something like, oh, I don't know, Great Oak Guardian, which is hilarious and fun. A 4/5 tree folk with flash reach, costs 6 mana in green, enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn, untap them. It always, whenever I'm searching this one up, it takes forever to find it because it's like, it says untap them and no other cards like say that. It's like untap all, untap each creature. No, untap them. But yeah, this is an interesting combination where you could technically go infinite with this very easily if you're like, okay, I've got a creature in play. I'll give it the ability to basically bounce something. And I've got other creatures in play that are like maybe mana dorks that can tap for mana. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, bounce the Great Oak Guardian back to my hand, recast it, bounce it back to my hand, recast it, bounce it back to my hand, recast it. So you can definitely do crazy things like that. Or if you have other creatures that actually have some tap effects too. Basically, if you already have Great Oak Guardian in your deck because you have like a bunch of tap effects, consider adding in Retraction Helix, Banishing Knack, because again, it is just like basically removal. You probably have other ways to untap things. So again, like if you want to remove a couple things, you probably have ways to like, okay, I'll tap my Vizier's Tumbling Sands, untap this other thing to tap it again so I can bounce 2 things. Or again, you can just go crazy with Great Oak Guardian, whatever that Azorius one is as well. That's like 5 mana and has 4 cast or whatever that one is. There's other ways to do it, but yeah, you can do some really weird kind of things like this. And again, unexpectedly, just I like it.
Oh, I can see this being great in Animar.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Great Oak Guardian becoming a 1.
1 mana, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, you just have a Llanowar Elves and you're like, all right, I got this game.
It's over now.
And again, also you're like infinitely pumping your team too, so keep that in mind as well. But yeah, I think it's an interesting combination. Again, one that you might already have Great Oak Guardian and you're in blue as well, so you're like, I could consider that as well. And it's not a useless card on its own. Again, it is removal. It's a bit risky, but like it's worth the risk if you're like, you have the upside for this.
For sure.
So, Nice. Any other ones you want to bring up? You're good?
No,
good?
That was great.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah, talking about under the radar kind of like, again, like not just like I win the game combos. You can win with some of them too, but like just unexpected, again, weird things. Like, again, like the Ghost Quarter Indestructible Land thing is like, so when you do that first time, I was like, what? Why did I never think of that? Huh? What? Yeah. There's some nice, easy like additions that you might be able to do. If you already have like half of it in the deck already, like, oh, like it actually does work with this other card too. Might as well just throw that in there now.
Yeah. Give it a try at least.
Give it a try. Try it out. Surprise your friends. And again, go to Commander Spellbook and paste your list in. And,
yes, definitely.
And see if you're any combos pop up already they might not know about. So yeah, again, Alek, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for putting all this together.
Of course.
Comment below your thoughts. Comment below some under the radar combos that you know as well. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.